Hi, I have your file in front of me and I'm going to try to do the handle with the texture, but it's going to take a bit, so you're going to have to be patient, okay? So I'm handling this as if I'm setting up for an entire illustration, okay? So I have your reference copy and I've even put a white layer underneath just so you'll know why in a minute. So I'm going to take this reference layer and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm now going to call it Clicky, but I'm going to remove the background. Okay, so what I want to do to it is, and you can see over here in my path palette, I've made a whole knife path. Now, I drew it very accurately. Let me get close. I drew it very accurately, pretty much inside, and I'll show you what I mean, but inside the 1 pixel inside. So I didn't get any of the background is what I'm trying to say. So there's my path right there. Okay, and I drew it a pixel. I always draw a pixel inside the element, inside the object. Okay, so let me make a statement here. So I'm going to make a selection by Control or Command clicking on that, and then with that background, look at, I'm turning off this bottom reference layer. I'm turning it off because I want you to see what's going to happen when I click the mask. If I don't click it off, it'll look like nothing happened. Okay, because there's a background in this one underneath. Long story short, with the clicky layer selected and me clicking the mask, you see how I just cut it out. Okay, so I can concentrate on it without everything there. Now, if I had had this bottom background on, you wouldn't have noticed the background just went away or got hidden, okay, by the mask. Do you understand what I mean? Okay, so don't look at over here on the channels yet. I'll explain kind of everything. I drew some preliminary paths, and this is how I handle painting. Okay, so I am going to, as an artist, I am going to not look at the texture. I'm almost going to paint this as if it is got no texture on it. Now, I show students sometimes what I'm talking about. Okay, so if I were, just for the sake of talking, if I were to take part of this handle here, and I didn't segregate it with a path, maybe I did, let me see. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Let me see if I did it there. No, I actually want to draw a path, and I'm going to talk about intersecting and adding paths together. So I'm going to deselect from this path here by clicking either down here so nothing is selected so I can draw a new path, or if that one was selected, I can control or command click on it to turn it off. Do you see how that turned off? Because I want to draw a path that just runs right through the knife like this, and then I can use my capability of intersecting things. So let me just draw a huge path around the knife blade. Okay, so what this did was it segregated the top from the bottom of the blade, right? Okay, so how do I use this? So I'm going to actually take this and I'm just going to say knife top. Okay, and I'm going to move that all the way up underneath the whole knife. Now, how do I make a selection of just the handle, which is what I want to do? So I make a selection by Control or Command clicking on that up here. So now it's all selected, right? And I can Command Alt Shift or Control Option Shift intersect with this one, with this top half. It's kind of like what we did on the mirror. So now I'm going to click it. Now, I have actually taken the whole knife, and all that the selection is the handle. So I'm going to go to saving the selection, and I'm just going to call it handle. So I don't have to do that again. So you see down here how I have a handle, but up here it was the whole thing. Okay, so let me deselect, and let's go back to clicking on the RGB image so I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so when and I don't do this for myself, but when I tell students to try to paint something and ignore the texture, this is what I'm talking about. So I'm going to put another little copy of the knife blade up above here. So I'm going to make a selection of this one down here in the channel. See this? I'm going to hold Control or Command and make a selection of it. I'm going to click to this and hit Control J or Command J. Now I'm going to turn everything off. Do you see how I just have a handle? Okay, just the handle, not the knife blade. Now you can obviously replay this to see what I've done, and I'll try to announce everything I'm going to do, but here's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and I'm going to blur this, and I tell students to do this to the point where you don't see any of the texture. You just see tone. Now I'm just about there. So even though it's blurry, I can now kind of clean it up and give it a clean edge. All right, so how do I do that? Well, again, with this selected up here, I can make a selection of this channel by Control or Command clicking on it, right? And now just clicking the mask. Now do you see how that more or less tightened up the outer edge? So when I'm painting right now, ignore the holes because we're going to get to those too, but I want to paint it as if there are no holes there. So I'm even going to go to this point just to show you what I'm talking about. I'm even going to take, and if it doesn't work, I'll tell you it's not going to work. I'm going to click over to the image right here. See how I clicked on it? All right. I'm going to make a very quick selection with the lasso tool around this hole right there. And I'm going to go to Edit, Fill with Content Aware. Now that should take it away, which is how I want you to paint it initially. Now let's do the same thing with this. Let's draw a selection around this, and this is what I refer to as visual preparation. It's making the job easier, okay? Now let's go up here and take this little one away, because I'm only going to do one of these buttons, and then we can duplicate it 3 or 2 more times for all 3 buttons. Now let's go to Edit, Fill with Content Aware, and that should take that one away. Now, I don't care if they're taken away perfectly, all right? So that's how I want to paint this handle, more or less. Not, and let me turn this on, not like this, but like this. So that is what is going to be the first thing that I paint. So between the reference layer and the Clicky Copy, I'm going to make a folder. So I just did. Now I'm going to click a bunch of layers inside the folder, and I'll say that this is going to be the handle fill. So that's what I start with. So what I want to do, and I've drawn paths for it, which I'm going to kind of show you right now. So I'm going to get rid of everything I've done there, meaning I'm turning off the 2 upper copies, okay, the 2 upper reference layers. Okay. I'm going to click down to the reference layer on the bottom, but I'm going to, I'm thinking out loud here, I'm going to, maybe I want to do it with this one. I actually want to do it with this one right here because I want you to see the paths that I've created. So I'm turning off the reference on the bottom. I just turned this back on, which is my Clicky Copy, right? So now I'm going to lower the opacity by a ton, just so you can barely see it, but I want to go over the paths that I've done with you. So the paths that I've done are the whole knife path. I've already kind of explained that, right? So I'm going to hit the P key and just touch them, just so you can see the whole knife path there. Now for the handle part, I should put a copy of the handle right here so I can show you what I'm talking about when I actually do the thing, when I actually go through all of this one, and this one. But I wanted you to see that I've more or less drawn the darks. So this one right here is going to help me target the dark on the right hand side of the knife blade. All right. I really want you to see that. So I'm going to, okay, I'm going to duplicate the Clicky Copy. I may throw this away in a second, but this one's going to have full opacity. So do you see this dark right here? that starts from this point that I'm touching. Let me hit the V key. This point that I'm touching here to here, you see that dark? Well, I have to account for it, so I drew a path for it, which was right there. So that path right there is going to help me when I want to do the dark on this side. Now I drew another one for this knife strip, what I call this red-white, this piece of metal on the side of the knife. I've drawn one which is the outer part of it, and I'll show you how we're going to do not only the red but the metal inside. That'll take about 3 layers. Okay, so I'm going to ignore that this even exists on the knife at the moment. So when I paint this dark blue, it's going to go all the way through that, because this little shape is going to be an upper shape, right? Okay, so as I'm painting, you will kind of get the idea of what I'm doing, but I then drew this little thumb part right here, okay? Then the last thing I did was the upper knife right here, and what I haven't done though is accounted for, and I'm going to kind of show you by just touching it. You see this darkness that goes from this part over? I have to account for that. So I purposefully only did, and I'm going to make a selection of it, I purposefully only did this one so I could show you that I'm going to use this path. Let me deselect, Control D or Command D, and now I'm going to duplicate it by dragging it into the new path icon. I'm not going to try to draw every path. Now do you see how I'm actually moving this up to here, and I'm going to say that this is number 2. Okay, I'll save the file. Now I'm going to take the P key and I'm going to move the line. So look at how I now have this line, and it's hard for you to see because it's blue on blue, which is why I actually made this. So now you can see what I'm doing. I actually want to move this up higher, and I can, maybe I'll put a little bit more opacity back in that so we both can see the dark on the knife blade right there. But now I can actually see what I'm moving. Now look at how I'm moving this path up to here. Let's take this one and put it on this side right about here, and let me fix my handlebar right like that. Okay, now let's move this one up to where the dark is on that side. Let's go over here and just try to relocate this a little bit like that, and I think I've done a really good job in accounting for that extra soft dark that's going to be in there in a few minutes. So that's why I have knife blade 1, I'm making a selection of it, and knife blade 2. Okay, so in some cases when I paint, I'm actually going to inverse the selection. Now let me show you what I'm kind of talking about. Let me turn this off. Do you see on this one right here, this is the one that I just drew, right? Well, the darkness occurs to the outside of this. See, I'll show you. The darkness occurs to the outside of it. See it? So I'm going to make a selection of that, go to Select Inverse, and that will let me paint the dark over this way, not inside. That's all I was talking about. So let me turn on the regular one, and we can kind of now, let me turn on this one, so now we can see what we're trying to paint. Okay, so I don't know if, well, I'm not going to say if I'm confusing you. I'm going to say just watch now how I paint things, and I'll try to explain everything as I'm moving through here. Very first thing that I do before I paint is I always put a copy, and this time I'm going to put a small copy of this knife right here, smaller, like so I can see what, when I'm painting I want to see the knife, because it'll, you know, the reference is, the knife when I'm painting is going to be on these layers. I'm not making sense here. Then the darkness, the handle is going to be painted here, but as I'm painting, I'm going to lose my visibility on the Clicky Copy, right? I'm going to lose it because I'm going to have to turn this off and on. I guess I'm just going to have to do it. You'll see why. I don't know why I'm having a trouble today explaining myself, but that's okay. So I'm going to duplicate this again for the 3rd time. I'm now going to right-hand click and apply the layer mask. Now, I'm going to click to this and hit Command or Control T. Now, if I just shrink it, I know I can move it over here now and shrink it even more. And now at least I have a visual of what it's supposed to look like. Now when I turn on the Clicky Copy, now I can see what I'm supposed to be looking at. And I could have made it slightly bigger, so I think I will. I think I'll just make it slightly bigger and move it here. And now I have a nice thing I can see as I'm trying to paint, watch this. So I'll turn off that, and now that's what I'm trying to paint. So if I can get to this, I'll be happy. So I take the B key, click to the bottom layer, which is the one I've named Handle Fill, hit the B key as I said, hold Alt or Option, and sample the majority of the color. So I think that's the majority of that color. So let's now make a selection of the whole handle. Remember this whole handle right here in channels. So now I have a selection of it. I'll turn this off for the moment. All right, and I'll just hit Alt or Option Delete. Now I've started my knife. I've started the blade. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to start getting our darks in there and using Gaussian blur to help. So this first one is going to be the dark on the right. And if I make a mistake, I'll start over on stuff. Okay, it's not a big deal. So this is how I'm going to handle this. And I want you to kind of pay attention when I say subtract, intersect, or exclude. Okay, so I am going to turn on the Clicky Copy and we're going to talk about it for a second. Right now, what I want to do is I want to put a dark value, this value right there. See how I just clicked on it? So I'm in the B key, I held Option or Alt, and I clicked on that dark. Let me get a better dark. I don't want the super dark, I just want to get in there to about that dark. There, that's perfect. So sometimes you got to zoom in, okay? Now I could have just turned this one off and turned this one on, and there's my dark that I could have had right there. So maybe for right now I'll leave this one on. I'll keep on clicking on and off this one. Okay, so how do I get to it? Well, let me turn this off so I can show you. And what I want to do now is use this upper knife number 2 and subtract it from this handle, so that the only thing that I can get exposed, I know you probably didn't understand what I just said. So let me turn this off and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to turn off the fill for a minute so you can get the idea. Do you see this selection is now the big handle, right? This was that part of the knife for the top shine. But do you see how when I just explained it to you, from here to here is where that dark goes, correct? Okay, so let's now do that. So if I make a selection of the, over here in channels, make a selection of the handle and go Command, Option, or Control, Alt, subtract that, do you see how now I've given myself an area to paint in right here, where it's going to let me do the dark on this side. So I'll explain it as I'm painting, and I'm going to stay a little bit far away like this as I'm painting. So let me turn that on. Let me hit Control H to show you that I'm temporarily hiding the selection. I'm going to make my brush kind of big, but not too big. I'm painting at 8 on the flow, right hand clicking to all the way soft. Again, paint between 8 and 10, right hand click to all the way soft, and now all I have to do is just paint the dark that I see right here. Now that looks pretty bad, right? No, I think it looks great because I can use layer masks to fix everything. Now I can also use this. You see the shine that's on this side of it right there? See how it gets brighter on the top? Well, it just so happens that if I actually go to this one and say light on top of handle, I now can grab on another layer. Let's turn this on right here. Let me get close and grab this light. So I'm in the B key, I'm holding Alt or Option, and now I'm going to even make that a little bit lighter by clicking the foreground color. Now I'm going to back off. Okay, I'm turning off this, and I'm going to take the same paintbrush on this new layer and put a little bit of light value up there. So do you see how I just now painted the light value and the dark value on two different layers, but I used the same selection? Okay, so I'm actually going to paint the light on this part right here, but I have to turn it off to show you that I went too far with the dark here. See on this knife blade right there how it's not got the dark there? That's okay, I'll fix it in a few minutes. Okay, so this is now what I want to do. I want to deselect, cool, click to my dark, go to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur it enough to where it's going to have that nice feel, and what I'm looking for is this nice painted feel right here, this blend out. So let's now make it a little bit stronger. And I am just about right there. It's 30. Let's go a little bit less there. That looks really good. Now, that gives me a real good feel, but now I have terrible overspray. You see the overspray that is way over here? Well, I have to fix that. So let's go Command D or Control D. I'm happy, oops, I have to say okay. Control D to deselect. Now, on this layer right here, I need to mask out the background. I know this is going to be a lot for you to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway. So, I go to make a selection of the overall knife. Okay, I inverse it. Now, to truly get rid of it, all I basically have to do is click the layer mask button, and I actually did that backwards. I'm going to start over. There was a key I should have clicked there, and I want you to hear the key. Okay, and I'm going to do it a little differently than I did. There's several ways to do the same thing. I want to get rid of the overspray on the outside, so I'm going to add a layer mask with no selection active and make sure it's white. Okay, now I'm going to make a selection of the knife. I'm going to inverse it. I'm going to hit Control H to hide it, or Command H. Take black, so I hit the X key here. And now please watch how I paint black. Look at the layer mask over there. Look at how it has black on the outside of the knife. See it over here? See how it has black on the outside? See how much I cleaned up what I needed to do right there? Now, I'm going to deselect. I'm going to turn on this right here so you can see that I need to remove that dark that I put on that layer right here. So if I turn this off, and now I can click and paint right there, I'm painting on the mask, right? Look, I'm painting on the mask, and I'm painting in black, which is removing the dark from that layer because black eliminates. Now I have the other layer which I can turn on, and it'll look better. Now what I need to do is to add a layer mask to this one right there. So I deselect, add a layer mask to it, and now I need to Gaussian blur it. So how many Gaussian blurs would it take to make that white look good? Well, I think only about 2 or 3. Okay, so you see how it's soft right here? You see how over here I have it too hard, and it doesn't even belong over here. So that's okay, I can eliminate it. That's why layer masks are there. So all I'm going to do is click to the image, turn it off, and make sure I'm on the right layer. Let's go to blur and blur it out. Now I want to go down to only about 3 pixels or 4. Just a little bit more, Brian. That's not 3. There, that's better. A little bit more. Oops, it's even higher than I thought. So now it's about 7 pixels, and you see how nice it looks on this top side of the knife. Okay, so I say okay. Now, I need to clean up the areas that don't need that white on it, which is right, whoops, I need to look, I made a stupid mistake that we all make. I'm painting on the image, not the mask. So I need to Control Z back, click to the layer mask, and now I need to paint out that light value that you saw over here a few minutes ago, so I'm painting down this dark side of the knife. Now, I've got that pretty good. Now, let's put in the thumb hole. So let's go to the thumb hole. And I'm not trying to solve this perfectly. I'm just going to say thumb hold. Now, all I have to do is find it. So the thumb hold is right there. So I make a selection of it. Now, if I show you the actual Clicky Copy, look at how the thumb hold actually redraws. I want to turn off my Clicky Copy because I have to show you something. Do you see how I drew this light value, or I painted it all the way through? Now, by painting the thumb hole, it'll make it, I'm going to say a phrase that we use in the business. It'll complete the drawing of it. So what I'm going to do is fill the thumb hole with a middle value first. Then I'm going to probably go thumb hold, watch this, Command C or Control C, and let me click up here and go Control V. So there's going to be 2 thumb hold layers. Let's do the first one. So let me turn off the Clicky Copy. Let's now look at the thumb hole that's in the little reference over here. Let me hit Control or Command H so I don't have to see the selection. And let's go grab a lighter value right there, okay? And now I probably should just flood this. Option, backspace, or Option delete or Alt backspace. So now you see how I put in the thumb hole, right? Which needs to be Gaussian blurred. Now what does that thumb hole need? Well, it actually needs a little bit of darker value on this side right here. So I'll go grab the darker value, make it a little bit darker, and I may need to fix a couple things. It always happens. And I'm clicking to thumb hold number 2. I never paint 2 colors on the same layer most of the time. Now looking at that little reference, let me move this over. Look at the reference. Now let's put this dark value right here. So now you can see how I have the dark value working its way up and around the thumb hold. Now I want to add a little bit more tone of this turquoise, so I'm going to grab it. And this is one time where I'm actually going to paint 2 colors on the same layer, but it's not really that tough. So can you imagine, can you understand what I just did? I painted, let me move, I can't see my, I'm sorry, I need to thin my palette down here just a bit so I can put it all on the screen for you. Okay. So, what was I saying? Oh yes, thumb hole. So there's the dark on that side, there's the light on this side. So, do you see how when I said to finish the drawing and to make the shape, I just opaquely put it on top of the handle. Then I'm putting the dark on that side and I'm good. Now I need to just Gaussian blur it a couple, both of them. So you have to deselect though. Remember I had Control H on. If I Gaussian blur, nothing will happen, right? Because there's a selection there. So I need to Command or Control to H to turn off the selection, or Command D or Control D to deselect. Okay? That's more important. I didn't mean Command H or Control H. I meant Command D or Control D. Thank you. Now, I don't need to add a layer mask because I think I've done pretty good, but I need to Gaussian blur it. So 3 or 4 pixels would be fine. So let's go back to this and let's see what that looks like. That actually doesn't look bad, but that's just a little bit too much. And I'm going to move this window so I can see. Okay, 1 wasn't enough. So let's go to more like 3. No, let's put in 4. So 4 is good. And now I need to click up to this one, and that one can go 4 as well. Now how do you do that? Quickly, see in filter how it gives me another, this right up here, at least it used to, this up here repeats what I just did. So it just added a 4-pixeled feather to the dark. Now I'm saving the file. Now I've got that knife blade looking pretty good. I don't have the darks that I need in there yet. So I'm actually going to click up to layer 8 and say second dark on handle. And then I can start doing the texture. Okay, so let me Now see where the second dark is. It's this one on upper knife blade number 2. So it's this one. So what I need to do is to subtract. Let me turn on this. Yes, I need to hit that dark right there. So what do I do again? I make a selection of the whole knife, or the knife blade in my channels. So I make a selection of the handle alone in channels. I now move over and subtract knife blade number 1. So I go Command, Option, or Control Alt, subtract it. Now I'm going to paint that dark value here, and I'm not going to try to go over to the other side. So I'm going to hit Command or Control H. I'm going to go grab the dark value right about there. It's very dark, but don't worry about it. And we're going to have to clean up the outside again. Okay, so let's now take this and let's now start painting this dark all across here. Now let's come right here and paint a lot of dark right there. And then right down like this. And then right into that corner. And now that's not bad at all. I can fix that in a few minutes when it comes to now the softness of it. Okay, so there it is. Let's deselect. Now, I'm going to add a layer mask to it after I deselected, so it's white, but I need to click back to the image. Now let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur again, and let's Gaussian Blur that a lot more than 7, but not tons more. Let's go to right about there. So that looks really good. Now, right here on the knife, it's a little cleaner. Right here on the knife, it's a little fuzzier. So I did a good job in getting the fuzzy look. Now I have to clean it up. So how do I clean up this top edge? How do I take away some of the Gaussian blur? The same way I did down here. So I'm going to click to the mask. I'm going to make a selection of the same thing that I just had right there. Do you see how I made a selection of upper knife, actually number 2. Now, I'm going to paint inside, but I'm going to hit Command or Control H to show you what I'm talking about. So if I paint black right up in here, do you see how I'm taking the Gaussian blur away from that top edge? See how now it got more crisp up here. Okay, that's good. Now, that's about all I want to do on that part. It gets a little bit more crisp on the bottom here too. So I'm going to click it like this. Now, to take the dark overspray away, I need to do the same thing I did down here. Okay? And there's other things that I could have done, and I'll explain that to you in a few minutes. Well, maybe I'll do it now. If I had clipped all of these layers to this bottom layer, I wouldn't have any overspray on the outer edge. That's perfectly fine to do. How do you clip all these layers? You hold Alt or Option and you click between all the layers. Now, that, I need to look at this first. That is actually, let me make sure I did this one. Okay, that now did everything. I have to move this over. That now cleaned up, and I have to give you more room to see my layer palette. So what I did was I clipped all of these layers here to the pixels that are on the handle fill. So now there is no overspray. Okay, and that's pretty cool. So now let's keep on going. So now let me try to do my texture. I'm going to start with the texture on the knife. So let's go 2 layers. Let's go texture 1 or texture light. I'll go light texture. This might be confusing. Let's go dark texture. Now I'm going to go to the light texture. So now what do? Well, I have to use this Clicky Copy. So I click to the image. Okay. I need to make a selection so that Photoshop only looks at the knife handle. So I just did. I now made a selection so that the only thing exposed to Photoshop is the handle. Do you understand? Okay, let's go to select color range. Let's move in close and let's grab this light value, which is right here. Now, that light value, I have to make sure that this is good. Okay, so this looks a little odd. They may have made a change in the color range window. It doesn't look as normal. Actually, what they did was, and I shouldn't even say this, but because I put a selection around the handle, they used to show the outer part black here. Now I guess they made that change and they don't. All right, so let me I'm going to take that and make it a little bit brighter. Okay, now what that means is, okay, what's white or light in this handle becomes the selection. What's black or dark gray doesn't become the selection. So when I say OK, it's now made a selection of all of these beautiful light areas, which I'm going to save as the same name in the layer. So I'm going to call this light texture. So that's how to now save it. Now you see the color that's right over here? Okay. It's imperative that I, first of all, click to my light layer. I want to paint it. Turn off the Clicky Copy and hit Control H or Command H to hide this. Now I make a semi-big brush. I'm not just going to flood it in there, I'm going to paint the texture. Now do you see how I'm actually painting the light texture on the knife blade given the selection? Okay, that's pretty cool. Now I'm going to go grab the dark texture. Okay, and I'm not, these holes, they have to be painted by me. Even though they look pretty good, I'm going to have to fix them. So let's now go do the same thing I just did, but let's do it and get the dark value. So here's what you got to do. You click on the Clicky Copy and you click to it. You make a selection on just the handle. So I just did. I Control or Command clicked my channel. We now re-enter color range. I zoom in and I grab this dark pixel right there. Now do you see what happened over here? Do you see how it got, and I'm leaving this at about 100 to about 90 to 100 up here, and I'm going to click OK. Now it got the dark pixels, at least one part of the dark pixels. There may be two parts. In fact, there's a dark here, and you see how there's a semi-dark over here, so we're going to need another dark layer to really make this work. So the very first thing you need to do is to save the selection. So let's call this dark texture number 1. Okay, now here's how we paint it. We click to the dark texture layer. We turn off the Clicky Copy and we hit Command or Control H to hide it. Now I'm going to start painting the dark texture. Now do you see how I've painted the dark texture, and it's got a really good look to it right here. But I don't have the subtle darks that are right here because I need to go color range those. So that's why I want these to get a little darker. I don't have that value at the moment, okay? I have a little bit of it, but not too much of it. So I'm just going to start painting the dark texture. Okay, so let's go to a new layer, call it Dark Texture 2. Now, back to what we need to do. Turn on the Clicky Copy, Brian. Deselect right this moment. Make a selection of the handle so that I segregate or focus on the handle only. So color range focuses on the handle only, right? That's the third time I've said that. Now let's go into color range. Let's zoom in and grab this dark, which is right there. Now, see what that picture changed, and that picture means that I've got a new selection coming, and there it is. Now I've got the new selection in there. Let's save that as dark texture 2. Now let's hit Command or Control H. Let's make sure we're painting on the right layer, which we are. Let's now take our paintbrush, make it a tiny bit smaller, and I'll zoom in a little bit. And now let's paint this dark texture. And that's working beautifully. That's really working pretty. Now, that is not a bad rendition of the handle. That's a pretty good job. And now I'm going to put the 2 layers in that are for this metal shine. And you're going to have to work that metal shine more than I am, but I'm going to start with it, okay? So I'm going to go, there's a red, I'm going to say stripe. And there's a light stripe. I don't know what else to say. Now, I'm going to click to the red stripe, because if I get close, you see the color red. So I'm going to paint 2 colors on the same layer, red and then dark red. And I'm not going to worry about the light value. So here is the little stripe that I actually painted. Do you see, drew. Do you see how if I turn on the Clicky Copy, do you see how it's right where the red is? Now I'm going to use a Photoshop technique to actually get me a selection for the inside whiter stripe. But I don't even care about it right now. All I care about is this color right here of red. So I've got the red in there. Okay, now let's go to here. Make sure we're on the correct layer. Let me hit Command or Control H. Okay, now let's click to the red stripe, turn off the Clicky Copy. I did, and I'm going to hit Alt Backspace or Option Delete. Now I have the red stripe in there. I filled it. I filled the whole thing up with it. Now I need to have a another one that says dark red stripe. So I think I lied to you. I think I might need even 4 layers. But with the same selection, let me get close and grab the dark. So I'm in the B key, I'm holding Alt or Option, and I'm grabbing that dark value. And now I'm going to paint it in there. So do you see how I'm painting that dark value? And you only see the red right as it goes up into this area right here. So let me zoom in and see that it gets even darker. See how you go red and then darker red around the corner? Well, let's go darker red around the corner. Okay, that's nice. I like how I did that. Now let's go to the light stripe. Now how do we do this? Let me Command or Control H the selection so you can see something. Now I'm going to turn on the Clicky Copy. I'm going to go to Select, Modify, Contract, and I'm going to contract it by as many pixels as it takes to get to the inside white line. So let me go like that, and it should have been some more. So let's go 5 pixels. So I Command or Control Z back. Let's go 6 pixels. And that's perfect. So I'm now going to say save the selection, and this is going to be, there's actually 2 stripes. There's a whitish stripe and a gray in the middle. Do you see what I'm talking about? It goes white and then gray. So let's go white stripe. And I'm saving it in channels. Now you can see down here, there's a white stripe. But I'm going to automatically make a new selection for the inside stripe. So let's go to Select, Modify, Contract, and it's less pixels than I did before. So let's go to 4 pixels. And I could have gone 1 more. So I'm going to go Select, Modify, Contract by 1 more pixel, and that's good. I could have done even 1 more. So I probably should have just Command Z back, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it at 1 more pixel. Good. Now let's go to Select, Save Selection, and let's go to gray stripe. Let me save the file. And now we need, look at, I have the light stripe, right? I probably, no, I need to name this white stripe now that I'm saying it, and it's probably not white, it's gray, but that's okay. And let's go to an inside new gray stripe and save the file again. So now I can use my channels. Look at, here's the white stripe, here's the gray stripe. You see them? So now to get back, so this isn't red over here. When a layer is red, it's telling you that you're in channels, you're not on the actual layers. Just click to the image part of the layer and you'll be fine. Okay, so if anything ever turns red, don't worry about it, just click to the icon there and you're fine. So I'm going to make a selection of the outer part. Okay, now let's grab the color. Now let me look and see the color. Okay, let's turn off this, which is the selection, which is the Clicky Copy. Let's hit Command or Control H, and now let's paint the white. And I'll probably have to come back with gray, but let me come with a bigger brush. Let me get closer, and let's now paint it down here. Paint it like this, paint it like this. I don't want any red tint in there, so I probably should cover it in gray first and then do red. And this is going to seem weird to you, but I'm going to do it anyway. So watch how I'm going to grab the gray. I'm actually going to grab this darker gray. Okay, this isn't going to make sense, but it is. And I'm going to hit Alt Backspace. Now I have a gray stripe. The red is gone, right? On this layer, now it's gray. But now let's use a white value or light value, do you understand what I'm saying, to lighten it up. So now instead of light pink, I'm going to have lighter gray, which is what it's supposed to be. So do you see how now I'm actually lightening that up as it moves right here? Okay, and I'll even come closer and go like this. So look, you see this little shine spot right there? I'm going to do it just like this. Okay, now let's make the brush bigger. Let me go see this end of it down here, and we're good to go. I probably shouldn't have done that. I don't even need that. A little bit brighter like this. Okay, now let's do the upper gray stripe, and it'll all make sense, hopefully. So now let's make a selection of the gray stripe. Okay, let's choose a darker gray, and then I'll even go darker with it. So let's now move over here. Hit Command or Control H so I can see it. And in this case, make sure you're on the right layer, Brian. Let's Alt Backspace or Option Delete and put in the gray stripe. Now, that doesn't look too bad, and now we have to kind of paint it in and out. So, what do I mean by that? So now on this one, since it didn't take me very long to do it, and I probably should Gaussian blur it a little bit, I'm going to grab this lighter value and paint a little bit on top of it like this. Okay, and now come over here. Let's now lighten up this a little bit right there, right on top of it, like that. Let's come back and see. Okay, that looks pretty good. And this is fine down here. And now let's get a little darker with it. So I could add a new layer, probably should, for just a little bit of dark detail. I should be a better person and use my own philosophy of one color on one layer. Now, looking at the little copy down here, right here, okay, I'm actually going to make my brush smaller, grab this dark value and paint a little bit of darkness right there on it, just like that. Kind of get a little random, and if I have to color range some of that, I will. Now I'm going to deselect. Now, do you see how the dark actually goes up a little higher? So what I need to do is to find where that light value is, which is right there. Okay, I'm actually going to use the same selection, the same layer that I just put this detail on right there. See that dark detail? Here, let me get close. See the dark detail? Now, I'm going to make a selection of the big stripe like this. Try to get it on the screen so you can see everything. And I'm just going to hit Command or Control H, and I'm going to paint it dark like this so it goes above the whole thing, just like that. Now, a little bit of color range will be cool in there. So I'll put one little color range texture. So let's say texture 3, just for whatever. Now, I'm actually just going to go grab this dark, kind of weird out texture there. Okay, so remember, you have to tell Photoshop what you're concentrating on. So let me make a selection of the whole stripe. Okay, you see how I made a selection of the whole stripe, which is over here. I'm sorry, it's right there. So now I've made a selection of that whole stripe. It was the first one I used in the path palette. Let's go to color range. Let me zoom in to color range. Whoops, I have to cancel. Sorry, got to turn on the Clicky Copy. You were probably saying that, weren't you? And let's go to filter, select color range. And now let's zoom in and grab this dark texture right there. And even darker. Okay, so maybe not quite that dark. Let me go to a little bit middle texture. Okay, that looks good. Now, I've got it. It's right there. So now I'll save this as texture 3. Okay, so now I have a layer for it. Let's turn off the Clicky Copy. Let's hit Command or Control H. And the only thing I'm painting in is going to be where this is. So I make a selection of this texture, which is now at the bottom, Mr. Sorial, right there. And I hit Command or Control H, and I just paint until I'm happy. And I'm putting a little bit of that random texture. You see that random texture that I'm putting in there? And let's just bring it around like this. Okay, that looks really good. Let's go around like this and put a little bit more down the knife blade here. Okay, and now I have that random texture in there. And if I wanted to, I could go back and get the light value texture, if that's what you want. So I'll do it really quick. I'll call it texture 4, and it can happen this fast. So I turn on the Clicky Copy. I make a selection of the whole knife strip right there. And now let's zoom in. Let's go to color range. Let's grab the light texture right there. And that's good. So now I've got that light texture. Let's save the light texture, which I said was texture 4. And this is what it takes in Photoshop. It just takes patience and sticking with the smaller things on higher layers. All right, I'm hitting Command or Control H. I'm turning off the Clicky Copy. Am I on the texture 4 layer? Yes. And now I can put in some of this randomness from here. And now you can see just how I've done that. And that looks pretty darn good. I kind of don't like some of this light texture, so I'm going to remove some of the opacity from it so that it doesn't just smack my eyes. And I'll save the file. Now, these holes, I actually don't mind these holes, and I've taken the time to, I'm going to put in 2 new layers, or 3 new layers, and I'm going to call it holes 1. So, these holes here, I probably should end this and do the holes later, but I want you to see how I'm going to do them. You see how I have, and I've drawn these ellipses to go from black to white to a black to a white to a black. So that's how I would actually paint them. Black, white, black, white, black. And I have these holes right here. Number 1 is going to be the dark. Number 2 is going to be the light. Number 3 is going to be the dark. Number 4 is the light. Then I actually took something like this, because I drew this ellipse. I used this tool right here in the tool palette, When you use the ellipse tool, make sure this up here area is not on shape. It's got to be on path. When you use anything inside of here, make sure it's on path, not shape. So I'm going to call this hole, I didn't even spell that right now, did I? Ooh, that's terrible. H-O-L-E-1, Brian. Okay, so in order to do this correctly, and I probably should not be doing this now, I should be doing it later. So if you want to stop the file and rewatch the texture, and then you can continue to watch this later for the holes, I guess. So I'll just continue. So I'm going to take hole number 1, which is a lighter value of, it's a little bit, I'm sorry, it's a dark value of this green, and then it goes to a light value of the green. Okay, so let me, and I might not need to do that here. I need to get that hole right here really close to this hole. So I'm going to deselect, click to this little copy right here, hit the V key and move this reference real close to that reference so I can zoom in on both. Okay, that's not bad. I'm pretty close on what I need to be. Click to hole number 1. Make a selection of the hole number 1 path. Okay. Take this dark value that I had, B key, Alt key, grab the dark greenish value, and hit Command or Control H, and now paint a little bit more dark inside of here, just like this, and clean that up, just like that. Now I need to Gaussian blur that. So I'm going to take that dark value that we just had, I'm looking at my reference, and I'm going to, so this is what I painted. I've only painted that much. Okay, now deselect and Gaussian blur it a couple pixels. So I'll go 3 pixels. Yeah, that's perfect. So now I think everything should get about 3 pixels at least at this point. Now let's go to hole number, this one, and let's go to hole 2. And I'm going to say that this is underscore white color. And it might not be white, but it'll be close to it. So now I'm going to zoom in and grab the color. Okay, now let's go grab the hole number 2. And I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. I need to make this smaller so you can see everything. Okay, and let me zoom in a little bit. So I'm painting this light value right there so it gets whiter, right? And then we're going to have to make decisions. So, meaning how we work our way to the inside. I'm going to try to be subtle about this, but I'm going to hit Command or Control H, and I'm going to paint the white in there, just like this. Remember, at first it's not going to look great, not until we get this whole thing painted. So I'm going to come around the back end of it like this, and I'm going to come over here like that, and then that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Let me now deselect and go deselect, right? Filter and Gaussian blur. Now we've Gaussian blurred that. You know what? That's too much. I need to now only make a 2 pixel Gaussian blur, and then I can use that one. So let's go to 2 pixels. Yeah, 2 is better. Now let's go to hole number 3. And hole number 3 is going to be the dark value. So I'm going to turn on the Clicky Copy. We're going to grab this dark value right here, right there, and I'm going to go to hole number 3. Hole number 4, no. It's actually going to be, because I made a few adjustments and I probably don't need everything that I used. It was this one right here. And how I got that one was, and I want you to see it, look at how I made a selection of where I'm painting that light value, which was actually hole number 2. So see how this was hole number 2? Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do is on hole number 3, to get the actual selection, I went to Select, Modify, Contract, and I contracted it by 6 pixels. Then, once I made it 6 pixels, I saved it under here, and I called it under Save Selection, I called it hole number 5. So now I'm making a selection of hole number 5. I'm grabbing the dark value. I'm clicking to this one, which I could name it hole number 5 just to not confuse you, because I didn't need a couple of those ones that I had done. That's fine. Let me turn off the Clicky Copy, and now let's hit Command or Control H, and let's now paint with a bigger brush this, and you can see how this is now working its way around, and you can see how better that hole is looking right here. Now, I need to get even darker with that. Okay, that's good right there. Now let's go to the next one. So now I'm going to be on hole 6, and let me make a selection of hole number 6. Yep, and now that one is subtle. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. See how this one is, remember I went white, then dark? Well, you see how there's a little bit of a white rim around the inside, so I don't need to power it in there. I just need to be subtle. So let me hit Command or Control H. Let's grab the same value. Now watch how I do this. I'm going to now just bring off this value right here just a little bit like this. And that's good. I like how I did that. Now, let's come across the back of it right here, and the back of it over here. Okay, now let's go to hole 7, and remember, things don't look good until you're almost completed. So let's go to hole number 7, and hole number 7 is when I really powered this in there with the dark turquoise. So let's go to Click. Let's make sure it's a dark turquoise, which it kind of is. Let's go a little higher in here, and let me get close. There, that's good. Now let me hit Command or Control H, and I am going to power this in here. And now that is not a bad hole. Now what I need to do to this is to nope, that's fine. What I need to do is to get a little bit more darker green, paint a little bit more darker green like this, just over the top of it, and now there's a pretty good hole for your knife or whatever, you know, that's just not bad. It's not bad, but I need to Gaussian blur those. So let me deselect, watch this, I'm going to click to number 5 and go to Filter, Gaussian blur. I'm going to click to number 6 and go to Filter, Gaussian blur, and click to number 7 and go to Filter and Gaussian blur. Now I've got those. Actually, I didn't like what I just did. I'm not going to do it to that one, and I have it pretty good. So that's not bad. Now watch what I do to all of them. I start with hole number 1. I shift click up here. I'm going to deselect the whole file, and I'm going to make a folder of this, and I'm going to call it hole 1. Now I'm going to duplicate it. Now I have hole number 2. And all I have to do is take all of those layers. So I take the V key, click to here, make sure I'm deselected, and bring the second one up to here and make it slightly bigger. So I hit Command or Control T to transform, and I'm going to not hold anything down and just make this slightly bigger. Let me put it out here and then put it right back where it's supposed to go, and I am real close to having that one look good as well. And I would be a little bit more picky on some things, but I just wanted you to see, let me turn off this little Clicky Copy, just how good that handle is looking. Here's the regular Clicky Copy, and here's what I've done. And I need to clean these up a little bit and make them tighter, but that's going to take a little bit more time, so I just wanted you to see how that can look really good with the texture. Texture came in layer texture 4, texture 3, and the dark detail. So I have, oh, that was for the button. That was for actually, Oh, that was for the stripe. So you know what? I'm actually going to grab all of these stripe ones. I shift clicked it on all of them, and I'm going to make a folder of the stripe. So let me say that this is, I always do this. I make folders of everything at the end. Oh, this dark one needs to go in there. Look, I didn't put in, I needed to put in these two here into the same folder. So I'm going to put them in the same folder. Now they are. Now I should be able to turn off the eyeball and the whole stripe should go away, which it is. So let's close that. And now here is the texture for the actual knife. 3 layers, 1, 2, 3, using color range. Then I had my hole number 2, hole number 1, and the stripe. So hope that has helped you. I know that was a lot. You may have to watch this a few times because that's what painting is all about. And if you have any questions after you've watched it a couple of times, let me know.